Good day, everyone. This is Pika Fiction bringing you another great story. Today we're exploring what if Ash became the Kalos king and Serena refused to let him leave until he married her. If you appreciate quality storytelling, please support us by liking and subscribing. It truly makes a difference. Now, let's immerse ourselves in the story. Chapter 1, The King of a Moment. The roar was a physical thing, a tidal wave of sound that washed over the battlefield and hammered against Ash's very bones. It was the sound of 100,000 souls screaming for a victor. Below, in the cratered arena of the Lumiose conference, two titans stood on the verge of collapse. Alan's Mega Charizard X, a creature of midnight and blue flame, heaved for breath, its draconic body bruised and smoking. Across the field, Ash's Greninja mirrored its exhaustion, one knee pressed to the scorched earth, its breath coming in ragged, visible puffs. Ash felt every ache in the water-type's body as if it were his own. The bond, their unique and terrifying fusion of spirit, was a live wire thrumming between them. It sang with a shared pain, a shared exhaustion, and a shared, unbreakable will to stand. He could feel the grit under Greninja's webbed feet, the searing heat radiating from Charizard's last flamethrower, the desperate thumping of its heart. The gigantic vortex of water on Greninja's back, a mark of their complete synchronization, churned with a sluggish, weary rhythm. Pikachu was a frantic ball of yellow lightning on his shoulder, chirping anxieties that Ash barely registered. His focus was a razor's edge, narrowed to the two figures in the ring. "He's tough," Ash breathed, his voice a raw rasp. "Tougher than anyone we've ever faced. And you are weary," a voice that was both his and not his whispered in the back of his mind. It was the voice of the bond, the consciousness of Greninja woven into his own. "The last attack nearly broke us." "One more," Ash murmured, his eyes locked on Alan. His rival stood tall, his own expression a mask of grim determination. He wasn't giving an inch. "We just need one more shot." Alan raised his arm, the mega stone on his wrist pulsing with dark energy. "It ends now, Ash." Charizard, Dragon Claw. The blue flames wreathing Charizard's maw roared to life, and its claws ignited with crackling, green energy. It launched itself across the ruined field, a meteor of black and emerald, closing the distance in a terrifying heartbeat. There was no time for a complex strategy. No room for a clever dodge. There was only this moment, the culmination of their entire journey through Kalos. Ash's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the symphony of the crowd. He didn't shout a command. He didn't have to. He threw his arm forward, a mirror of the ninja frog below, and poured every last ounce of his will, his hope, his entire being into the bond. "Now." Greninja responded instantly. It straightened up, its weary body surging with a final, defiant burst of power. The water shuriken on its back began to spin, swelling to a colossal size. But this time, something was different. A strange, cobalt light, the color of a deep-sea trench, began to bleed from Ash's skin. It wasn't a glow, it was a physical manifestation of energy, a shimmering aura that crackled with the scent of ozone and distant thunderstorms. The light raced down the invisible tether of their bond and slammed into Greninja. The water of the giant shuriken didn't just glow, it transmuted. The churning blue-green liquid became a spinning disk of pure, solidified aura. It was a star of impossible blue energy, humming with a power that felt ancient and utterly primal. The stadium lights flickered, dimmed by the sheer magnitude of the energy being drawn into that single point. On the sidelines, Serena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Clement's glasses slipped down his nose, his eyes wide with scientific disbelief. That's not water energy. The readings are off the scale. It's something else entirely." Bonnie, clutching Deden, simply stared, her small face a canvas of awe. "It's like Ash is glowing." Charizard was almost upon them, its dragon claw poised to strike the final blow. "Let it go," Ash thought, a command that was a prayer. Greninja roared, a sound not of a Pokémon, but of a force of nature unleashed. With a final, explosive heave, it hurled the aura shuriken. The disk of light didn't fly like a projectile. It tore through the fabric of the arena. It didn't spin, it warped the air around it, creating a silent, blue-tinged vacuum in its wake. Charizard's dragon claw met the shuriken, and for a fraction of a second, there was no sound at all. The roar of the crowd, the crackle of energy, the frantic commentary, it all vanished, swallowed by the impossible event horizon of their collision. Then, the sound returned as a cataclysm. The aura shuriken didn't just break the dragon claw, it consumed it. The green energy dissolved like mist. The blue star slammed into Charizard's chest, and the resulting explosion was not of fire or water, but of pure, unadulterated life force. A dome of cobalt light erupted outwards, washing over the entire stadium. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. It was like plunging into the soul of the world, a dizzying, overwhelming rush of feeling, of life, of connection. Every person in the stadium felt it, a collective gasp rippling through the stands as the energy wave passed through them, harmless but profound. When the light faded, Charizard lay unconscious in a newly formed crater, its mega evolution gone, reverted to its normal, orange form. On the other side of the field, Greninja stood for a single, triumphant second, before collapsing, the bond shattering as Ash stumbled back, a wave of vertigo washing over him. The blue aura around him sputtered and died. Charizard is unable to battle. Greninja wins. And the victory goes to the challenger, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. The declaration was almost lost in the sudden, deafening silence, followed by an explosion of cheers that dwarfed everything that had come before. He had done it. After all the leagues, all the losses, all the near misses, he had finally won. Pikachu launched itself from his shoulder and tackled him in a hug, nuzzling his cheek with frantic, joyful chirps. Pika Pi, Pikachu. Ash laughed, a weak, breathless sound, and hugged his partner back. We did it, buddy. We actually did it. But the elation was short-lived, punctured by a sound that did not belong. A low, electronic hum, followed by the groan of tortured metal. The massive holographic scoreboard above the arena fizzled, showering the field in harmless sparks. The lights throughout the stadium flickered violently, then died, plunging the entire Colosseum into the dim, gray light of the overcast evening. The crowd's cheers faltered, turning into murmurs of confusion and concern. What's happening? Clement muttered, pushing his glasses back up. A power overload? The energy from that final attack must have completely fried the stadium's grid. Before anyone could answer, they appeared. Dozens of them. Descending from the sky on silent anti-gravity engines. They were sleek, white and silver drones, shaped like predatory insects with a single, unblinking red lens for an eye. They moved with an eerie, synchronized grace, fanning out above the stadium, their presence casting a sudden, chilling pall over the scene. From the central body of each drone, a metallic proboscis extended, ending in a claw-like apparatus that began to glow with a faint, purple light. They weren't attacking. They were harvesting. The residual energy from Ash's final attack, the lingering motes of blue aura, were being drawn towards the drones, siphoned into the claws like dust into a vacuum. Panic began to ripple through the crowd. This wasn't part of the show. Alan, already by his Charizard's side, looked up, his face grim. What are they? Ash didn't have an answer. He only had an instinct, a cold, primal certainty that these things were hostile. That they were stealing something that didn't belong to them. The last dregs of his connection with Greninja flared, not with power, but with a sense of violation. He didn't think. He acted. Pikachu, aim for the lead drone's optic. Quick attack, then Iron Tail. Hawlucha, I need you. Use Flying Press to knock that one off balance. Gudra, cover the main exits. Don't let them get near the crowd. Dragon Pulse if they get too close. His voice rang out with an authority that stunned even himself. It was sharp, clear, and carried across the field with unnatural clarity. His Pokémon, summoned from their Pokeballs in a flash of red light, moved without hesitation. They were exhausted, but his commands were a shot of adrenaline, a beacon in the growing chaos. Pikachu became a yellow blur, rocketing up a fallen piece of stadium debris and launching itself into the air. Its tail hardened into a metallic sheen and slammed into the red eye of the nearest drone, shattering the lens. The drone faltered, its anti-grav engine sputtering. But as it fell, two others moved to intercept it, their claws shifting into capture nets. "No, you don't. Greninja!" Ash yelled, pointing. Greninja, somehow, found the strength to push itself to its feet. It moved in a blur, snatching up jagged pieces of the broken battlefield and flinging them like shuriken, forcing the other drones to scatter. A strange warmth spread through Ash's chest. The blue light, fainter this time, flickered around his hands. He felt a connection not just to Greninja, but to all of them, a network of intent, a battlefield awareness that was absolute. He saw every drone, every terrified face in the crowd, every possible angle of attack. "They're trying to funnel the energy," he realized aloud, watching their patterns. "They're creating a perimeter. Ash, be careful." Serena cried out from the stands, her voice tight with fear. He barely heard her. His world had narrowed to this fight. It wasn't a battle for a badge, but for control. For protection. He felt a surge of power from the ground beneath his feet, a low thrum that seemed to answer the hum in his blood. And then, the ground truly began to shake. It wasn't a tremor. It was a deep, resonant pulse, a slow, powerful heartbeat that originated from deep within the planet. The ruined earth of the arena floor began to crack and split, but not from destruction. Green light, the color of new spring leaves, poured from the fissures. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ancient forests and deep earth. The drones faltered, their harvesting operations ceasing as they re-evaluated this new, immense power source. The crowd fell utterly silent, a collective intake of breath the only sound. From the largest fissure in the center of the stadium, it rose. A colossal creature, part serpent, part canine, composed of thousands of glowing, hexagonal green cells. It moved with a fluid, impossible grace, its single, unblinking eye surveying the scene with an intelligence that was galaxies old. A long, scarf-like appendage drifted behind it, and its mere presence seemed to warp reality. Zygarde. The Order Pokémon. In its 50% for me. The god of Kalos' ecosystem had manifested in the heart of its largest city. The drones immediately reoriented, their red eyes locking onto the legendary Pokémon. They perceived it as the ultimate power source. Several of them fired their capture nets, thick weaves of energized cable designed to subdue and drain. Zygarde didn't even flinch. It unleashed a soundless pulse of energy, and the nets disintegrated into dust motes. It turned its ancient gaze, sweeping over the drones, over Elan, over the stunned champion Diantha who was now on the field, and finally, its eye came to rest on Ash. The world seemed to lock into place. In that gaze, Ash felt a scrutiny that peeled back every layer of his being, examining not just his actions, but his intent, his heart, his very soul. He felt the echo of every bond he had ever forged with a Pokémon, every victory, every loss, every simple act of kindness. The thrumming in his own body intensified, the faint blue aura around his hands brightening, resonating with the green light pouring from Zygarde. They were connected, somehow. Two sides of the same coin. On the sidelines, Bonnie's eyes glazed over. She took a step forward, her voice no longer her own. It was deeper, resonant, layered with 1,000 voices that spoke as one, echoing Zygarde's will. The balance was threatened, the voice spoke through Bonnie, each word causing the ground to vibrate. Power was wielded to dominate, to control. A wound upon the world. Zygarde's gaze remained fixed on Ash. But here, the voice continued, power was shared. A heart connected to another. A human spirit harmonized with the life force of this land. An ancient pact, long dormant, has been fulfilled. Ash felt a searing heat build on the back of his right hand. He gritted his teeth, hissing in pain as he looked down. A pattern of light was burning itself into his skin, etching lines of brilliant green energy directly into his flesh. It was a complex sigil, reminiscent of Sigurd's own hexagonal cells, arranged in a crown-like crest. The world requires a guardian, the voice of Sigurd declared, its authority absolute and terrifying. A focal point for the harmony between human and Pokémon. An anchor for the lifeblood of Kalos. The burning intensified for one agonizing second, and then faded, leaving a luminous, green tattoo shimmering on his skin. It felt alive. A part of him. We bestow upon you the title and the burden. You are Ash Ketchum. And you are now the Guardian King. With its decree delivered, Sigurd seemed to fold in on itself. Its colossal form dissolved back into thousands of individual cells, which flowed back into the cracks in the earth. The green light faded. The ground sealed itself, leaving no trace of the fissures, save for the pristine, unblemished grass that now grew where the ruined battlefield had been. It was over. Sigurd was gone. The drones, their primary target, vanished, and their systems, likely scrambled by the sheer force of Sigurd's presence, abruptly aborted their mission. They retracted their instruments, ascended in perfect formation, and vanished into the clouds. Leaving behind a stadium of dumbfounded spectators, a bewildered champion, and Ash, standing alone in the center of the field, staring at the glowing mark on his hand. The roar of the crowd was gone, replaced by a suffocating wall of whispers, clicks of cameras, and the first frantic shouts of reporters. What was that? The Guardian King. Look at his hand. Did Sigurd just crown him? The wave of humanity broke. Officials, league staff, and a swarm of media personnel surged onto the field, their microphones and cameras like weapons pointed at him. The questions came like machine gun fire. Mr. Ketchum, can you explain what just happened? What is that mark on your hand? Are you in league with the legendary Pokémon Sigurd? What did it mean, Guardian King? Ash flinched back, the world spinning. The questions were a meaningless buzz in his ears. He felt claustrophobic, the air thick and unbreathable. His battlefield clarity was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked urge to flee. This was worse than any battle. This was a cage made of eyes and expectations. Ash. Serena's voice cut through the noise. He saw her at the edge of the chaos, her face pale with worry, Clement and Bonnie right behind her. Alan was fending off a few reporters, creating a small pocket of space. Ash stumbled towards them, his Pokémon gathering protectively around him, shielding him from the worst of the encroaching mob. We have to get him out of here. Serena said, her voice firm as she pushed a cameraman aside. Clement nodded, his expression serious. This way. There's a service exit behind the locker rooms. They formed a flying wedge, with Gudra's sheer bulk and Alan's imposing figure clearing a path. Ash moved in a daze, his gaze locked on the impossible, glowing sigil on his hand. It pulsed with a soft, gentle rhythm, in time with his own frantic heartbeat. King. The word echoed in his skull, nonsensical and terrifying. He wasn't a king. He was a Pokémon trainer from Pallet Town. His goal was to battle, to travel, to see the world. Not this. Not whatever this was. They finally burst through an exit into a back alley, the roar of the stadium complex mercifully muffled behind the steel door. Ash leaned against the cold brick wall, sucking in a deep breath of the cool, damp air. Everyone okay? Alan asked, his voice strained. Clement was already examining a small device. The energy signatures are gone. Both Sigurd's and the drones. It's like it never happened. But it did happen, Bonnie said softly, looking up at Ash. Squishy said you're the king now. Ash flinched as if struck. Don't call me that, he snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. He looked at his hand, the green sigil still glowing softly in the dim light. He tried to rub it off, scrubbing at his skin with his other hand, but the light was part of him, shining from beneath the surface. It was as real as the freckles on his nose. Serena stepped closer, her expression gentle. "Ash, are you hurt?" She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away, hiding it behind his back. "I'm fine," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. It's nothing. Just some weird light show." He was lying to himself, and he knew it. He could feel the sigil. It wasn't just a mark, it was a connection. A low, constant hum at the edge of his senses, a feeling of being plugged into the world itself. He could feel the rumble of the monorail several blocks away, the flutter of a flock of fletchling taking roost on Prism Tower, the collective sigh of the city settling into evening. It was too much. "We should get back to the Pokémon Center," Clement suggested, ever the voice of reason. "We need to get the Pokémon checked, and we need to be somewhere less conspicuous." The walk back was a blur. They took back streets and alleyways, Ash pulling the hood of his jacket low over his face, his right hand jammed deep into his pocket. The sigil's light was faint enough to be hidden by the fabric, but he could still feel its warmth, its incessant, quiet pulse. The city seemed different now, louder, more vibrant, and it was giving him a pounding headache. Back in the sterile privacy of their room at the Pokémon Center, after Nurse Joy had given all their Pokémon a clean bill of health, a tense silence fell. Ash's team, sensing his distress, stayed close. Pikachu refused to leave his shoulder, Greninja stood sentinel by the door, and the others gathered in a protective circle. Ash sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He had won the Kalos League. This should have been the greatest night of his life. He should have been celebrating, calling his mom, calling Professor Oak. Instead, he felt like a cornered animal. "So," Clement said, breaking the silence as he polished his glasses, a nervous tick. "A divine proclamation from a legendary Pokémon anointing you as the sovereign guardian of the entire Kalos region. Scientifically speaking, this is unprecedented." "You're not helping, Clement," Serena chided softly. "He's a king. Ash is a real king." Bonnie chirped, before Serena shot her a warning look. Ash finally looked up, his eyes sweeping over his friends. They were looking at him differently. Not Clement and Bonnie, maybe, but he saw it in Serena's eyes. A new layer of awe, mixed with a deep, profound worry. He hated it. "I'm not a king," he said, his voice flat. "It was just, a thing that happened. A weird side effect of the battle." "Ash, Zygarde burned a crown onto your hand," Serena said, her voice laced with an exasperation she was trying to hide. "It doesn't get much clearer than that." "So what?" he shot back, standing up and beginning to pace the small room. "What am I supposed to do? Sit in a castle? Wear a cape? It's ridiculous. I'm a Pokémon trainer." He stopped, his back to them, and looked out the window at the glittering lights of Lumio City. The Prism Tower stood tall in the center of it all, a monument to a world he suddenly felt disconnected from. He just wanted to go home. Or not even home. He just wanted to go. To walk a new road, find a new gym, meet a new Pokémon. That was his life. That was who he was. A plan, simple and obvious, formed in his mind. The only plan that made sense. He turned back to them, a flicker of his old, familiar energy returning to his eyes. "Okay. Here's what we do. We lay low for a day or two, let this whole king thing blow over. Then, once the fuss dies down, I'll head out. Maybe I'll check out the region Professor Sycamore mentioned, the one with the regional variants. A new adventure. It'll be great." He smiled, a strained, desperate imitation of his usual grin. He was trying to convince himself as much as them. Back to basics. Back to the road. It was the only way to outrun this. Clement and Bonnie looked at each other, unsure of what to say. But Serena didn't hesitate. As Ash took a step towards the door, as if he might leave right then and there, she moved, planting herself directly in his path. She wasn't angry. She wasn't pleading. Her expression was one he had never seen before. It was calm, resolute, and utterly unyielding. The look of someone who had made a decision from which there was no retreat. "No," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of an anchor. Ash blinked, taken aback. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not asking for permission." "I know," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "And I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. You can't leave." A spark of frustration ignited in his chest. "Serena, you can't be serious. I can't stay here. This whole thing is crazy. Did you see those drones? Did you hear what that thing said? People are going to be coming for me. Not for battles, but for this," he said, holding up his marked hand. "I can't fight a whole region. The best thing I can do is disappear." "You're wrong," she said, taking a small step closer. Her voice was still quiet, but now it trembled with a fiercely controlled passion. "Running is the worst thing you could possibly do. You think those drones were a one-time thing? They weren't there for the trophy, Ash. They were there for your power. The power Zygarde just officially recognized. Running doesn't make you disappear, it makes you an untraceable, unregistered weapon. It makes you a target for everyone, and a threat to everyone else." She looked at the sigil on his hand, her eyes softening for a second with fear, before hardening again with resolve. "You stood in that stadium and you commanded your Pokémon like a general. You faced down those machines without a second of hesitation to protect thousands of innocent people. And you faced a god and it chose you. This isn't a trophy you can leave on a shelf in Pallet Town and forget about. This is who you are now." Ash stared at her, speechless. The force of her conviction was a physical blow. She saw him not as a victim of some bizarre event, but as something more. Something powerful. And it terrified her. "I won't let you run away from it," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, raw with emotion she could no longer contain. "I won't let you face what's coming alone. You need an anchor, Ash. A reason to stay. A reason to learn how to control what's happening to you. If you're just a wanderer with this power, they'll hunt you. But if you have a position, a recognized place, if you have a queen." Her words hung in the air, the implication so staggering that Ash felt the blood drain from his face. He started to speak, to protest, to say anything to stop the tidal wave he could feel coming, but she cut him off, her eyes shining with unshed tears and a terrifying, beautiful fire. She took a final, deep breath, closing the last inch of space between them. "You are the king of Kalos now, Ash. Whether you like it or not. And a king needs a foundation. So I won't let you leave." Her gaze held his, a vow and a challenge all in one. "Not until you marry me." Chapter 2, the weight of the sigil. The silence that followed Serena's declaration was more profound than the hush that had fallen over the stadium. It was a vacuum, sucking the air from the room, leaving only the frantic drumming of Ash's own heart for a soundtrack. He stared at her, his mind a frantic scramble of denial and disbelief. The words had been spoken, but they refused to assemble into any coherent meaning. "Marry me." It was an alien concept, a phrase from a different language, from a different life. Clement, who had been quietly attempting to reboot his tablet, froze mid-swipe. His glasses slid down his nose, and his jaw hung slightly agape. He looked from Serena's unyielding expression to Ash's shell-shocked face, and the inventor's mind, usually so quick to analyze and categorize, simply short-circuited. The socio-political ramifications of a royal union established under duress in the face of a divine mandate are, complex, he stammered, his voice a squeak. Bonnie, however, had no such complexities to navigate. Her eyes, wide as dinner plates, lit up with an incandescent joy. "You're going to marry Ash?" she gasped, bouncing on the balls of her feet. "Does that mean you're going to be a queen? Does that mean you'll be my sister-in-law? Can I be the flower girl? Can Deden be the ring bearer?" The barrage of innocent, excited questions was like a series of hammer blows, driving the reality of Serena's words deeper into Ash's skull. He finally found his voice, a choked, incredulous laugh that held no humor. "Marry you? Serena, are you crazy?" he sputtered, taking a step back. The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in. "We're kids. You. We can't just get married." "I'm not crazy," Serena said, her voice dropping, losing its hard edge and becoming something softer, more pleading, though her stance remained firm. "I'm terrified. For you. Don't you see what happened out there? That wasn't just a battle. The world changed tonight, and it changed around you. So your solution is to trap me?" he shot back, anger and panic warring for dominance in his chest. "To tie me down here with this? This isn't you, Serena. The Serena I know would be telling me to follow my dream, to go on my next adventure. The Serena you know grew up," she retorted, a flash of fire in her eyes. She watched the boy she cares about nearly get torn apart in a stadium, get branded by a god, and then become the #1 target for a bunch of mysterious high-tech criminals, all in the space of 10 minutes. "The next adventure, Ash, is right here. It's surviving this." She gestured wildly towards his hand, still jammed in his pocket. The gesture, the reminder, sent another thrum of unwanted sensation through him. He pulled his hand out, staring at the glowing green sigil. It seemed brighter now, or maybe he was just more aware of it. The low hum at the edge of his perception sharpened into a distinct, undeniable input. It was a flood. He could feel the pulse of the Lumio City power grid, a vast, subterranean river of electricity. He could feel the rhythmic clatter of the subway trains in their tunnels deep beneath his feet. He could sense the collective anxieties of the people in the Pokémon Center, a trainer worried about her sick furfru, a nurse tired from a long shift, a child crying in a room 2 floors down. It was a chaotic symphony of life, 1,000 threads of existence all plugged directly into his brain through the burning port on his hand. A migraine began to blossom behind his eyes. He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing the heels of his palms against them. "You don't get it," he groaned. "I can feel it. All of it. The whole city. It's too loud. I have to get away from it." Serena's fiery anger evaporated in an instant, replaced by a wave of empathy. Her expression softened, and she took a hesitant step toward him. "Ash." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I just need to get out on the road. Somewhere quiet. Where it's just me and my Pokémon and the wind. I can handle this if I can just get some space." "They won't give you space," she insisted, her voice gentle but firm. "Think about it politically, Ash. Right now, you are a private citizen who, in the eyes of the world, can summon and commune with a legendary Pokémon that holds the ecological stability of the entire region in its hands. You have been given a title, Guardian King, that implies authority over the land itself. You are a king with no kingdom, a general with no recognized army. To every government, every ambitious corporation, every remnant of Team Flare, you look like one of two things, a messiah to be controlled, or a rogue nuclear weapon to be neutralized." Clement, having rebooted his brain along with his tablet, chimed in, his voice regaining its usual analytical tone. "She's right, Ash. From a strategic standpoint, your current status is unstable variable. A formal, public position would change that. It would give you legitimacy. A royal marriage, historically, is the most powerful and recognized method of cementing a political alliance and stabilizing a claim to power. This isn't about power." Ash protested, his voice cracking. "I don't want any of this. It doesn't matter what you want anymore. Serena's voice rose again, thick with desperation. It's about what you are. A king needs a queen, Ash. Not for romance, not for a fairy tale, but for strategy. It grounds you. It makes your power a dynasty, a court, something the world can understand and negotiate with. It gives you allies. It gives you a legal standing. Without that, you're just a freak. A powerful, dangerous freak that someone will eventually decide needs to be put down for the greater good. The raw, brutal honesty of her words hit him harder than any dragon claw. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw past the impossible proposal. He saw the sharp, terrified intelligence in her eyes. She wasn't planning a wedding, she was planning a war. She was trying to build him a fortress, and her ultimatum was the cornerstone. Pikachu, sensing the shift in the emotional current, hopped from Ash's shoulder to Serena's, nuzzling her chin. Pikachu, he chirped softly, a gesture of comfort and, perhaps, of agreement. Before Ash could formulate a response, the television in the corner, which had been muttering a low-volume newscast, suddenly blared to life. Repeating this breaking news. The Lumio City monorail system is experiencing a catastrophic malfunction. An eastbound train on the Azure Line has lost all braking and speed control and is accelerating towards the Trocadero curve. The four of them turned to the screen. The broadcast showed terrifying aerial footage from a news chopper. A sleek, silver monorail train was hurtling along its elevated track, sparks showering from its undercarriage. The lights inside were flickering, and through the windows, the blurred faces of passengers were visible, pressed against the glass in panic. Officials believe a sudden, unexplained energy pulse disabled the train's primary and secondary control systems. The train is currently carrying over 200 passengers and is approaching speeds of 150 km per hour. The Trocadero curve, a sharp, embanked turn ahead, is not rated for speeds above 60. If the train hits that curve. The newscaster didn't need to finish the sentence. The graphic on the screen did it for him, showing the train's trajectory ending in a fiery, horrific plummet to the streets below. While his friends stared in horror, Clement was already typing furiously on his tablet. An energy pulse. Just like the one that fried the stadium grid before the drones appeared. This can't be a coincidence. He brought up a schematic of the city. There's no way to stop it. The emergency brakes are electronic. The track can't be switched. There's nothing to be done. Ash's headache, the sensory overload, the impossible argument, it all vanished, burned away by the cold, clear focus that only imminent disaster could bring. 200 people. He was already moving towards the door. Where's the nearest access point to that track? Clement's fingers flew. 3 blocks north. But Ash, what can you do? I don't know, Ash said, grabbing his jacket. But I'm not going to stand here and do nothing. Serena didn't try to stop him. She was right behind him. We're coming with you. There was no argument. They were a unit. They burst out of the Pokémon Center and into the cool night air. The city was no longer just a source of overwhelming noise, it was a patient in crisis, and he could feel its pain. The collective spike of fear from the train was a sharp, stabbing note in the symphony of the city. They raced through the streets, Ash's long legs eating up the pavement. The sounds of sirens began to converge in the distance. He could feel the train now, a screaming bullet of metal and panic getting closer and closer. The sigil on his hand burned with a fierce, urgent heat. They found the maintenance ladder leading up to the elevated track, shielded from the main street by a large office building. Police cars were already cordoning off the area below, but they hadn't secured the access points yet. Go. Clement urged, pointing up the ladder. Alan called, he's meeting us there. He'll try to run interference with the authorities. Ash scrambled up the ladder, Serena right on his heels. They emerged onto the narrow service walkway alongside the track just as the train came into view, a silver blur in the distance, growing larger with terrifying speed. The high-pitched screech of its magnetic drive was a physical assault on the ears. The wind it generated whipped at their clothes. "Okay, plan." Ash shouted over the roar. "Gudra, I need your bulk. Can you slow it down?" "Gudyare." The huge dragon type materialized on the track, planting its feet and bracing for impact, its body glowing with the defensive energy of a bite attack. The train slammed into Gudra a second later. The impact was titanic. The entire structure of the track groaned and shuddered. Gudra slid back, its gooey body absorbing a tremendous amount of kinetic energy, but the train was too fast, its momentum too immense. It was slowing, but not enough. Gudra was being pushed back towards the deadly curve just a few hundred meters away. "It's not working." Serena yelled, her face pale. "The structural integrity of the track is failing. The whole thing could collapse." Ash could feel it. The stressed metal, the fracturing concrete supports. Gudra couldn't hold it. No Pokemon could. Brute force was only going to bring the whole disaster down on top of them. He needed another way. He looked at his hand, at the sigil that was now glowing so brightly it was visible through his glove. The power. The terrifying, overwhelming power. He remembered the feeling of absorbing the poisoned energy in the forest, the agony of it. He was afraid of it. Afraid of what it would do to him. Then he looked at Serena. She was staring at him, her hair whipping around her face, her eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't the power she was afraid of. It was the train. It was the people. And in her gaze, he saw a flicker of something else, trust. Complete and unconditional trust in him. She wasn't trying to trap him. She was trying to save him. And now, it was his turn to save them. All of them. "Get back," he said, his voice quiet but firm. He stepped forward, planting his feet on the walkway. He took off his glove, revealing the blazing green crown on his skin. He closed his eyes, shutting out the roaring train, the screaming wind. He focused on the sensory flood, but instead of pushing it away, he leaned into it. He stopped fighting the connection and listened. He listened to the song of the city, the hum of the steel, the deep, slow breath of the earth beneath the concrete. He remembered Serena's words from the stadium. "Show them your bond, not just your power." He wasn't going to command it. He wasn't going to force it. He was going to ask. He reached out his marked hand, not towards the train, but towards the track itself. He laid his palm flat against the cold, vibrating metal of the service rail. The moment his skin made contact, the sigil flared, and a circuit was completed. The world seemed to expand in his mind. He was the steel. He was the concrete. He was the earth. He felt the train's immense momentum not as an impact, but as a pressure, a current in the river of which he was now a part. He didn't push against it. He guided it. "Help me," he thought, a plea sent not into the air, but into the very substance of the world around him. "Slow down. Safely." The response was immediate. The massive steel girders of the track began to groan, not with strain, but with effort. The magnetic guideway, fried and useless moments before, flickered with a green, organic light. The polarity began to shift, not through an electronic signal, but through a sheer act of will, creating a counterforce, a drag on the runaway train. Beneath the city, the earth itself seemed to answer. An imperceptible shift, a settling of foundations, reinforced the shuddering pillars of the track, strengthening them against the strain. The metal of the track itself seemed to become more malleable, more forgiving, absorbing the vibrations that threatened to tear it apart. The train, which had been screeching and showering sparks, began to slow. Its furious momentum bled away into the structure of the track, channeled down through the pillars and harmlessly into the bedrock of Kalos. The deafening roar subsided into a long, drawn-out groan of protesting metal, then a loud screech, and finally, with a shudder that ran through Ash's entire body, the monorail slid to a complete stop. It rested less than 10 meters from the beginning of the deadly Trocadero curve. Silence descended, broken only by the distant, approaching sirens. The connection shattered. The world snapped back into its narrow, normal confines, and the backlash hit Ash like a physical blow. The energy he had channeled, the sheer force of will he had exerted, left a void in its wake. His legs gave out. The world tilted, the lights of Lumio City spinning into a dizzying vortex, and he collapsed onto the walkway. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Serena's face, her eyes wide with terror and awe, as she rushed to his side. He awoke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. He was in a private room, the lights dimmed. The first thing he felt was a cool, gentle pressure on his right hand. He turned his head, his body feeling heavy and leaden. Serena was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on the mattress, her hand clasped firmly over his. Her fingers were laced through his, her thumb resting directly on the now dormant sigil. It was still there, a pattern of faint green lines on his skin, but its light was gone, its hum silenced. It felt quiet. At peace. He lay there for a long moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathed. The chaos of the monorail, the weight of his new reality, it all seemed to recede, leaving only this single, quiet point of stillness. She had been right. About everything. Running was a child's solution to an adult's problem. The power he held was not a prize to be won or a curse to be escaped. It was a responsibility, a tool. And it was too heavy to carry alone. He saw it now with a painful clarity. Her ultimatum wasn't a cage. It was a lifeline. She wasn't trying to chain him to a throne, she was offering to hold him up so the crown wouldn't crush him. A wave of something warm and unfamiliar washed over him, a feeling that went deeper than friendship, more profound than gratitude. He looked at her sleeping face, the faint lines of worry still etched around her eyes even in slumber, and he knew. He knew he couldn't leave. He knew he didn't want to. Her eyes fluttered open, as if she could feel his gaze. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, and then her focus sharpened on him. A wave of relief washed over her features. Ash, she breathed, her voice thick with sleep. You're awake. You've been out for hours. The doctor said it was just extreme exhaustion, but... He didn't let her finish. He squeezed her hand, a weak but definite pressure. She fell silent, her eyes searching his. He didn't have the words. He had never been good with them. He was a creature of action, of instinct. But in the quiet of that hospital room, with the weight of a kingdom settling on his shoulders, he knew what he had to do. He had to accept the lifeline. He looked from her worried eyes down to their joined hands, his scarred and calloused fingers intertwined with hers. It felt right. It felt solid. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, an understanding that ran deeper than any spoken vow. The argument was over. The decision was made. In the world outside, a city celebrated a miracle. A king had been revealed. But in that small, quiet room, a kingdom of two had just been born. Chapter 3, The Serpent and the Dragon. The summons came not by raven or royal decree, but via a sleek, black rotom phone delivered by a grim-faced man in a suit who looked like he'd been carved from granite. The message was simple, direct, and carried the unassailable weight of authority. Champion Diantha requests your presence. Enclave Chateau. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. Absolutely not, Serena said, her arms crossed as she paced the length of their new, significantly upgraded suite at the Lumios Hotel. The Kalos League, in a move of frantic damage control and public appeasement, had relocated them to the presidential suite under the guise of honoring their heroic champion. In reality, it was a gilded cage, complete with plainclothes security in the hallway. Come alone. After everything that's happened. It's either a trap or an ambush. Ash was sitting by the window, staring down at the bustling city. The sensory overload had receded since the monorail incident, settling into a low, constant hum at the back of his mind. It was no longer a painful cacophony but a stream of ambient information he was slowly, unconsciously learning to filter. He could feel the collective mood of the city, a mixture of awe, fear, and rampant curiosity, all directed at him. He didn't need to watch the news to know he was the only thing anyone was talking about. "Diantha's not our enemy," he said, not taking his eyes off the street below. "She's the champion. She's just trying to understand what's going on. Like everyone else. She represents the established order." "Ash," Clement interjected, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. He had transformed a corner of the suite's opulent living room into a makeshift command center, screens filled with energy grid schematics, news feeds, and lines of code. "And you, a teenager arbitrarily appointed by a mythological being, are the single greatest disruption to that order in modern history. She has to see you as a potential threat." "Exactly," Serena agreed, stopping her pacing to stand beside Ash. "They'll try to control you, or test you, or make you sign away your autonomy. Going in alone is a terrible idea." Ash finally turned from the window, his gaze meeting hers. There was a new stillness in his eyes, a thoughtful gravity that hadn't been there a week ago. "If I'm going to be what Sigurd said I am, what we decided I have to be, then I can't hide behind you or anyone else. I have to face them. I have to show them I'm not a threat." He held up his right hand. The sigil was dormant, a faint pattern of green lines like a delicate tattoo. "If I go in with an entourage, it looks like I'm spoiling for a fight. If I go in alone, it shows I'm willing to talk." Serena studied his face, her own expression a mixture of pride and apprehension. He was learning. He was thinking politically, strategically. It was what she had wanted, but seeing him walk willingly into the lion's den was still terrifying. "Then I'm going with you," she stated, not as a request. "Not to the meeting itself. But I'll be there. At the chateau. If they see you have a queen, a partner, it changes the dynamic. It's not just them versus you. It's them versus a potential new government." Ash considered this. It felt strange, this constant calculus of appearances and power dynamics, but he couldn't deny her logic. It was a chess game, and Serena saw the whole board. "Okay," he agreed. "But if things get tense, you stay out of it. This is a conversation I need to have." "Don't worry," she said with a wry smile. "I'm much more effective from the sidelines." Before they could strategize further, Clement let out a low whistle. "Ash, Serena, you need to see this." They gathered around his laptop. The screen showed a live press conference. A dazzlingly charismatic man with sharp, tailored clothes and a smile that seemed precision-engineered for reassurance stood at a podium before a sea of reporters. Behind him, a sleek, minimalist logo, a stylized A intertwined with a D. The Chiron read, "Alastair Thorne, CEO of Ethereum Dynamics, addresses Lumio City." "Who's that?" Ash asked. "The man whose drones attacked the stadium," Clement said, his voice grim. "I've been digging into his company. Ethereum Dynamics. They've exploded onto the scene in the last 2 years. They specialize in large-scale environmental energy solutions. They've developed atmospheric purifiers for industrial zones, geothermal regulators for unstable fault lines, all cutting-edge, world-changing tech." On the screen, Thorne leaned into the microphone, his voice smooth and confident. "The events of the last few days have been unprecedented," he began, his expression one of deep, compassionate concern. "The Lumios incident, as it's being called, and the subsequent failure of the monorail system, point to a terrifying new reality. Our region's energy grid, the very lifeblood of our modern world, is dangerously unstable. It has been subjected to wild, unpredictable fluctuations from a source we are only just beginning to comprehend." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He never mentioned Ash by name. He didn't have to. Ethereum Dynamics was founded on one simple principle: creating a safer, more predictable world through technological mastery. Nature is powerful, it is beautiful, but it is also chaotic. It is prone to earthquakes, to storms, to surges. While others look to myth and superstition for answers, we look to science and engineering. That is why, today, I am announcing that Ethereum Dynamics is offering its full resources, free of charge, to the people of Kalos. We will deploy our proprietary energy harmonizers throughout the region to stabilize the grid, to protect our infrastructure, and to ensure that a disaster like the one so heroically averted by Mr. Ketchum never has a chance to happen again. The reporters erupted into a frenzy of questions. Serena felt a chill crawl up her spine. "He's brilliant," she whispered, her voice laced with a horrified respect. "He's not attacking you. He's positioning himself as the solution to the problem of you. He's making your power, a power tied to nature, seem primitive and dangerous, and his technology seem like the only logical, safe alternative." "The serpent offering the apple," Ash murmured, his eyes narrowed on the man's smiling face. He could feel the falseness radiating from the screen, a discordant note in the city's symphony. This man, Thorne, felt empty. A void where a connection to the world should be. "Worse," Clement added, bringing up another window. "His harmonizers, the base technology looks disturbingly similar to the siphoning mechanism on the drones from the stadium. He's not offering to stabilize the energy, he's offering to put a meter on it. And if he controls the grid, he controls everything," Ash finished, the pieces clicking into place. This was the real enemy. Not the politicians at the chateau, but the smiling man on the television, offering salvation in a box. The next day, Enclave Chateau rose from the Kalos countryside like a fairy tale castle, its elegant spires and manicured gardens a picture of old-world power and wealth. Ash, dressed in a simple but clean dark jacket and pants, a compromise Serena had fought hard for, felt deeply out of place. He'd faced down gods and monsters, but the polished marble floors and ancestral portraits unnerved him in a way a charging toros never could. Serena, dressed in a tasteful blue dress, walked beside him, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his arm. It was a pose for the cameras they knew would be watching, but it also felt grounding. Bonnie and Clement remained with the Pokémon at a nearby café, their designated eyes and ears. They were met at the grand entrance by the granite-faced man from before, who introduced himself as an aide to the champion. "Mr. Ketchum," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The champion and the governors are waiting. The lady may wait in the West Salon." Ash met Serena's eyes. A silent conversation passed between them. "Be smart. Don't let them bait you." He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and nodded. "Okay." He followed the aide down a long, echoing hall. The air was thick with the scent of floor wax and centuries of political maneuvering. He was led into a grand, sunlit room where a long, ornate table was set. Seated around it were 5 figures who radiated an aura of immense authority. At the head of the table sat Diantha, the Kalos champion, her movie star beauty eclipsed by an expression of intense seriousness. Beside her were the 4 regional governors of Kalos, stern-faced men and women in severe business attire. There was no greeting. Diantha simply gestured to the single empty chair at the far end of the table. The message was clear: he was the supplicant, the outsider. Ash walked the length of the room, the sound of his footsteps unnaturally loud on the parquet floor, and took his seat. He met Diantha's gaze directly, his own expression calm and unreadable. He would not be intimidated. "Mr. Ketchum," Diantha began, her voice as cool and polished as the table between them. "We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I'm sure you understand the concern that your recent ascension has caused." "I didn't ask for it," Ash said simply. A portly governor with a large mustache scoffed. "And yet, you seem to have accepted it. The incident with the monorail was quite the public display. Some are calling you a hero. Others are calling you a vigilante with an terrifyingly undefined level of power." "There were 200 people on that train," Ash replied, his voice even. "What would you have had me do?" You could have trusted the authorities to handle it, a sharp-featured woman, governor of the coastal region, countered. The authorities said nothing could be done, Ash stated, not aggressively, but as a simple fact. Were they wrong? The room fell silent for a beat. They weren't used to being challenged so directly. Diantha leaned forward, steepling her fingers. The issue, Ash, is not your intentions. It is your power. We have no way to measure it, no way to predict it, and no way to control it. Sigurd called you a king, but Kalos is a republic. We have a government. We have a champion. We do not have kings. Sigurd called me a guardian king, Ash corrected gently. A protector. That's all I've ever tried to be. I don't want your government. I don't want a throne. But this power is real, and it's tied to the health of this region. We can either pretend it doesn't exist until it's too late, or we can figure out how to work with it. His sincerity was a tangible thing in the room. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't making a power play. He was a boy with the weight of the world on his shoulders, looking for help. It disarmed them, shifting the atmosphere from interrogation to something closer to negotiation. Diantha's expression softened slightly. And what do you propose? Before Ash could answer, the doors to the room swung open again. This time, it wasn't an aide. An older woman with hair like spun silver and eyes that crackled with ancient fire strode in, her dragon-themed robes swishing behind her. It was Drasna, the dragon-type master of the Kalos Elite Four. Forgive my interruption, champion, Drasna said, her voice a low, gravelly rumble. But words are wind. Power is not debated in a chamber, it is demonstrated on a field. The legends of old say that a king's worth is proven in combat. If this boy is truly the guardian king, then he must have the spirit of a dragon. She turned her piercing gaze on Ash. I, Drasna of the Elite Four, challenge you to a ceremonial battle. 1-on-1. A test of mettle. To show us what you truly are. A boy with a strange new power, or a true partner to the heart of Kalos. A slow smile spread across Ash's face. This, he understood. This was a language he spoke fluently. The political chess match was over. Now, it was time for a Pokemon battle. I accept, he said without hesitation. The ceremonial battlefield was a pristine lawn behind the chateau, with the governors, Diantha, and now Serena watching from a safe distance. The mood was electric with tension. This was no friendly match. This was an audit. Drasna stood opposite him, her expression fierce and unyielding. They need to see that you are more than just a conduit for Sigurd's power, she said, her voice low enough for only him to hear. They need to see the trainer. Show them the bond that earned you this gift in the first place. She was testing him, yes, but she was also giving him the key to victory. Thank you, Ash said, a genuine note of gratitude in his voice. Don't thank me yet, boy, she growled, before raising her voice for all to hear. Let the trial begin. Go, Dragalch. She threw her pokeball, and a large, intimidating dragon/poison type emerged with a hiss, its kelp-like appendage waving menacingly. Ash knew instantly who to call. His bond with this partner was second only to Pikachu. Greninja, I choose you. The ninja frog appeared in a crouch, its eyes immediately locking with Ash's. The bond flared to life between them, a familiar, welcome current. They didn't need to speak. They were one. Dragalge, sludge bomb. Drasna commanded. The dragon spit a volley of toxic purple spheres. Double team, then cut through with aerial ace. Ash commanded. Greninja blurred, creating a dozen illusory copies that scattered across the field. The real one shot forward like an arrow, its body glowing, weaving through the sludge bombs and slamming into Dragalge with a powerful, graceful strike. Drasna was unfazed. Impressive speed. But can you handle this? Dragon Pulse. Dragalge unleashed a roaring beam of draconic energy. Meet it with water shuriken. Greninja formed a shuriken of water in its hand and hurled it. The two attacks met in a hissing explosion of steam and energy. But Drasna was a master strategist. Now. Use the steam as cover. Poison tail. From within the thick cloud of steam, Dragalge's tail began to glow with a virulent purple light. It lashed out, a deadly whip aimed at Greninja's blind spot. Ash felt a surge of raw power from the sigil on his hand. The instinct was overwhelming, unleash it. End this. A wave of Zygarde's energy, a miniature land's wrath, and this battle would be over in a second. He could feel the power begging to be used, a tidal wave behind a fragile dam. Don't overwhelm them, Ash. Show them your bond, not just your power. Serena's voice. Not shouted from the sidelines, but a memory, a mantra, her words from the hospital, from their argument, echoing in his mind. She was right. Winning wasn't the point. How he won was everything. He fought the surge back, gritting his teeth. He poured his will not into the sigil, but into the bond with Greninja. Substitute, he yelled. At the last possible second, Greninja shed its form, leaving behind a log that took the full force of the poison tail, splintering into pieces. The real Greninja appeared high in the air above Dragalge, hidden by the sun. Drasna's eyes widened in appreciation. A classic ninja tactic. Now, Ash, he thought, synchronizing completely. The vortex of water erupted on Greninja's back, and it transformed, becoming the sleek, powerful Ash Greninja. The transformation felt different this time, smoother, more controlled. Ash didn't feel the drain he usually did, instead, he felt a strange synergy between the bond's power and the quiet, ambient energy of the sigil. One was a roaring fire, the other a deep, steady river. Together, they were something new. It's not over. Dragalge, Twister. Drasna roared. Dragalge whipped up a cyclone, trapping the descending Ash Greninja. But Ash had already planned for this. Spin with it. And use the momentum. Water shuriken, full power. Trapped in the vortex, Ash Greninja began to spin, becoming a blue and black blur. It channeled the cyclone's own energy, building speed. Then, it unleashed the giant shuriken from its back. Infused with the rotational energy of the twister, the shuriken didn't just fly, it drilled through the cyclone, dissipating it instantly and slamming into Dragalge with devastating force. The dragon type was thrown back, landing hard at Drasna's feet, knocked out. Silence. Ash Greninja landed gracefully, the transformation receding as the bond settled. Ash let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He hadn't used the sigil's overwhelming power. He had won as a trainer. Drasna stared at her fallen Pokémon, then looked up at Ash, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her weathered face. She recalled Dragalge and walked across the field to him. The heart of a dragon, she said, her voice filled with respect. She offered her hand. And the mind of a master. You are no mere conduit, boy. You are a true partner. Ash shook her hand, a wave of relief washing over him. He had passed the test. He looked over at the governors. Their expressions were no longer hostile, but filled with a grudging respect and a deep, thoughtful apprehension. He had shown them his strength, but more importantly, he had shown them his control. Diantha approached, her own expression unreadable but no longer cold. It seems, Mr. Ketchum. King Ash, that we have much to discuss. He had won their respect. But as he looked past them, past the chateau, towards the distant silhouette of Lumio City, he knew the true battle, the one against the smiling serpent with his promises of a safe and ordered world, had only just begun. Chapter 4, The Scars of Progress. The weeks following the ceremonial battle at Enclave Chateau were a strange, surreal limbo. Ash's victory over Drasna had bought him a fragile truce with the Kalos leadership. The governors and champion Diantha, while still deeply unnerved, had shifted from viewing him as a rogue element to a volatile but potentially vital asset. They engaged him in a series of tense, circular meetings, debating his role, his jurisdiction, and the parameters of his guardianship. It was a slow, grinding process that made Ash's head spin. He preferred facing a hyperbeam. Serena, however, thrived in it. She became his shadow, his advisor, his shield. She would sit just outside the formal meetings, and in the breaks, she would distill the complex political jargon into simple truths. Governor Rouleau is worried about the coastal economy. Show him how a stable ecosystem helps the fishing industry, she'd advise. Or, Diantha is testing your temperament, don't rise to her baiting questions. She was the strategist, the diplomat, the architect of his fledgling reign. He was the king, but she was the one teaching him how to wear the crown. Meanwhile, Alastair Thorne's serpent-like influence continued to spread. Ethereum Dynamics trucks became a common sight on collision highways. Sleek, white energy harmonizers, tall, minimalist towers that hummed with a quiet, sterile power, began to rise on the outskirts of towns and near power substations. Thorne's public relations campaign was a masterpiece of manipulation. News reports celebrated the Thorne effect, stabilized power grids, reduced energy costs, and a general sense of technological security. He was the hero of the modern age, the man bringing order to the chaotic whims of nature. Clement, however, saw the truth. From his command center in their ever more permanent hotel suite, he monitored the energy readings from across the region. "It's a lie," he muttered one evening, his face illuminated by the glow of a dozen graphs. "Look." Ash and Serena leaned over his shoulder. The screen showed two energy signatures overlaid. One, a vibrant, fluctuating green line, represented the natural life force of Kalos, the energy Ash could feel humming beneath his skin. The other was a flat, sterile blue line representing the output of Thorne's harmonizers. "Every time a harmonizer is activated," Clement explained, pointing to a dip in the green line, the natural energy in the area drops. "It's not stabilizing it, it's suppressing it. Damping it down. And worse, there's a third reading, faint but undeniable." He isolated a thin, purple line. "A small fraction of that suppressed natural energy isn't just disappearing. It's being redirected. Siphoned. It's the same signature I saw on the drones at the stadium." "He's not just shutting the power off," Serena breathed, her eyes wide with horror. "He's stealing it." "He's mapping the network," Ash said, his voice low and cold. The pieces were falling into place, forming a terrifying picture. "He's finding the strongest currents. The sources." He looked at a map of Kalos on another screen, dotted with the locations of Thorne's towers. They weren't random. They formed a distinct, deliberate pattern. "He's cornering something." The sigil on Ash's hand, which had been a quiet, dormant pattern for weeks, suddenly flared with a searing, agonizing pain. It wasn't a burn, it was a psychic scream. A wave of pure, undiluted agony slammed into his mind, so intense it drove him to his knees. He cried out, clutching his head, the world dissolving into a nauseating blur of static. "Ash!" Serena shouted, dropping to his side, her hands hovering over him, unsure how to help. He couldn't answer. He was no longer in the hotel room. He was somewhere else. A forest. Ancient, primordial, filled with towering trees that drank the moonlight. But the moonlight was wrong, tainted with a sick, purple haze. The leaves were crumbling into dust, the bark of the great trees splitting, a dark, viscous sap weeping from the wounds. The very air was thick with the stench of decay. Pokémon were fleeing, their bodies weak, their movements sluggish, their eyes wide with terror. And beneath it all, a deep, resonant hum of pain. A single, pure note of suffering that vibrated from the very soil, a note he felt in the marrow of his bones. It was Zygarde's pain. Raw and immediate. The vision, the feeling, it was all being transmitted through the sigil on his hand. This wasn't a premonition. It was happening now. He gasped, the hotel room snapping back into focus. He was drenched in sweat, his body trembling. A forest, he choked out, his voice a raw whisper. To the west. Near the base of Mtimoline. It's dying. There was no time for questions. The look on his face, the sheer, unadulterated horror in his eyes, was enough. Clement was already at the map, his fingers flying. There's an old-growth forest there, one of the most ancient in Kalos. It's a designated Pokémon sanctuary. It's also, oh no. What? Serena demanded. The 3 newest harmonizer towers, Clement said, his voice grim. They form a perfect triangle around it. Ash. I think they just activated them. Alan, who had become a semi-permanent member of their small resistance, arrived minutes later, his face set in a hard line. He'd been patrolling the city, keeping an eye on Ethereum's movements. I got your call. What's wrong? Thorne made his move, Ash said, pulling himself to his feet, his body still shaking but his eyes burning with a cold fire. He's not just suppressing the energy. He's poisoning it. They didn't waste time on transport. They flew. Alan's Charizard and Ash's Noivern carried them through the night sky at blistering speed, the wind whipping past them like a physical force. Ash could feel their destination pulling at him, a festering wound in the world's soul. The pain was a constant, grinding pressure in his skull, a sickening counterpoint to the healthy thrum of the land they flew over. They arrived to a scene of absolute devastation. The line between the healthy forest and the blighted area was as sharp and unnatural as a scar. On one side, vibrant green life. On the other, a landscape of death. The trees were skeletal, their leaves turned to black ash. The ground was cracked and dry, emitting a faint, foul-smelling purple vapor. The only light came from the 3 Ethereum towers visible on the surrounding hills, their beams converging on the heart of the forest, bathing it in a ghastly, violet glow. At the border of the decay, a defensive line had been formed. Sleek, white-armored soldiers, Ethereum's private security force, stood guard, their faces hidden behind impassive helmets. Patrolling between them were advanced, 4-legged mechs, their designs brutally efficient, armed with energy cannons and containment fields. They were waiting for a response, Alan growled, his hand tightening on the mega stone on his wrist. This is an ambush. They're not just poisoning the forest, Clement said, analyzing the scene through a pair of high-tech binoculars. They're targeting a focal point. My readings show a massive concentration of Zygarde's energy at the center of the blight. A core, maybe. Or a major nexus. The pain in Ash's head spiked again, confirming it. Zygarde's heart was bleeding, and Thorne was twisting the knife. There was no room for subtlety. Ash landed, his expression grim. Serena, Clement, Bonnie, stay back. Find a way to disrupt those towers. Alan, you and I are clearing a path. With pleasure, Alan said, his Charizard letting out a challenging roar. The Ethereum guards raised their weapons. Halt. This is a restricted Ethereum dynamics operation zone. You are ordered to stand down, a synthesized voice boomed from the mechs. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Ash commanded. A bolt of yellow lightning lanced out, striking the lead mech. The machine shuddered, but an energy shield flared to life, absorbing most of the blow. Energy-dampening shields, Clement observed from the tree line. They're designed to counter Pokémon abilities. Alan tapped his Mega Stone. Then we'll just have to break through. Charizard, Mega Evolve. A torrent of power erupted, and Charizard transformed into its fearsome black and blue form, a guttural roar tearing from its throat. Flamethrower. A jet of blue flame engulfed a second mech, and this time, the shield buckled and shattered under the sheer, sustained heat. The machine exploded. The battle was joined. Ash's team fought with a desperate fury. Hawlucha's flying press, Noivern's boomburst, Gudra's dragon pulse, they crashed against the Ethereum line, a chaotic symphony of light and sound. Alan's Mega Charizard X was a force of nature, a whirlwind of claws and blue fire, tearing through the mechs with a vengeance born of past mistakes. But the Ethereum forces were disciplined, numerous, and their technology was formidable. For every mech they destroyed, 2 more would take its place, their energy cannons firing beams that sent Pokémon reeling. Ash fought alongside his partners, the pain from the sigil a constant, agonizing distraction. He could feel the forest dying around him, the life draining out of it with every passing second. He had to get to the center. He had to stop the bleeding. "I have to get through," he yelled, pushing past a smoking wreck. "Ash, wait!" Serena cried out, her voice filled with alarm. She and Clement had been working on a device, trying to find a frequency to disrupt the towers, but they were running out of time. He didn't listen. He broke through the front line, his remaining Pokémon covering his advance, and ran headlong into the blighted zone. The moment he crossed the threshold, the poisoned air hit him like a physical blow. It was cloying, heavy, and it burned his lungs. The ground beneath his feet was brittle, crunching like dead coral. The psychic pain intensified 100-fold. He was in the wound now, and it was consuming him. He reached the heart of the forest. In a small clearing, the grass was black, the flowers petrified. And in the very center, a single, ancient tree stood, its bark split wide open. Nestled inside was a Zygarde core, a small, green hexagonal being, the source of all the life in this forest. It was pulsing weakly, its light flickering like a dying candle, ensnared in a lattice of crackling purple energy projected from the 3 towers. This was the Nexus. This was Thorne's target. The forest wasn't just dying. It was being murdered. He knew, with a sudden, soul-crushing certainty, what he had to do. Clement couldn't disable the towers in time. His Pokémon couldn't break the energy field. There was only one way. He had to take the poison himself. He stumbled forward, falling to his knees before the dying tree. "Ash, no. Don't do it." Serena's voice screamed from the edge of the clearing. She had followed him, unable to bear watching from a distance. The terror in her voice was absolute. "It will kill you." He looked back at her, his face pale and strained, his eyes filled with a terrible resolve. "It's the only way," he rasped. He turned back to the tree and pressed his right hand, the hand with the sigil, against the dying, corrupted earth at its base. He didn't try to fight the poison. He didn't try to cleanse it. He opened the floodgates. He made himself a conduit. "Come to me," he thought, a desperate command sent into the blighted land. "Leave this place. Come to me." The response was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The purple energy field around the Zygarde core wavered, and then surged, not outwards, but inwards, into the sigil on his hand. A torrent of toxic, corrupted life energy flooded into his body. The pain was beyond imagination. It was a fire in his veins, a thunder in his bones, a scream that tore from his throat without making a sound. He felt his own life force being consumed, overwritten by the digital poison of Thorne's machines. His vision turned purple, then black. Every nerve ending was alight with an agony so pure it was a religious experience. But it was working. The purple haze across the clearing began to recede, drawn into him like a vortex. The cracks in the ground began to knit themselves together. The brittle, dead leaves on the forest floor stirred with a hint of renewed life. The Zygarde core's light, freed from the suffocating energy, flickered from a weak pulse to a steady, healthy glow. He was a human lightning rod, drawing the storm of corruption into himself to save the land. From the corner of his eye, he saw them. Small, silent drones, the same models from the stadium, had emerged from the tree line. Their red eyes were locked on him, their lenses recording every agonizing second. They captured his distorted face, his body convulsing on the ground, the waves of purple energy pouring into him. They documented the forest healing around him, but they framed it to look like the destruction was emanating from him. He was saving the forest, but he was losing the war. The last of the poison flowed into him. The three towers, their function complete, powered down. The forest was saved. The pain subsided, leaving a hollow, echoing emptiness in its wake. Ash collapsed, his body limp, his arm numb and cold. He looked down at his right arm. Dark, spidery veins, the color of a deep bruise, now crawled up his skin, originating from the sigil and spreading past his wrist, a permanent, ugly testament to the poison he had absorbed. He had scarred himself, body and soul, to protect this piece of Kalos. He heard Serena scream his name as he fell forward, his face hitting the now soft, living earth. The world faded to black, the image of her terrified face and the cold, unblinking red eye of Thorne's drone the last things he saw. Chapter 5, A Vow in the Ashes. Consciousness returned not as a rush, but as a slow, creeping tide of aches and exhaustion. Ash's first sensation was of softness beneath him, the scent of clean linen, and a dull, persistent throbbing in his right arm. He opened his eyes to the familiar, opulent ceiling of their suite at the Lumiose Hotel. For a moment, he could almost believe the forest had been a nightmare. Then he moved his arm. A sharp, cold pain, like ice in his veins, lanced up to his shoulder. He pushed himself up, his body protesting with a groan, and looked down. The scar was still there. A web of dark, purplish-black lines radiated from the Zygarde sigil, a jagged, ugly tattoo of corruption crawling up his forearm. It looked like a lightning strike had been frozen under his skin. The sigil itself was dim, its green light barely a flicker, as if exhausted. "Don't move too much." Serena's voice was soft, but heavy with a weariness that mirrored his own. She was sitting in a chair by the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, though the room was warm. She wasn't looking at him, but out at the city, her teacup untouched on the windowsill beside her. She hadn't slept, the dark circles under her eyes were stark against her pale skin. "How long was I out?" Ash asked, his voice a dry rasp. "A day and a half," she replied, her gaze still fixed on the cityscape. "Clement and the doctors a champion Diantha sent over, they said you were stable." Profoundly depleted was the term they used. "They don't know what to make of that." She gestured vaguely toward his arm without looking. "They said it's not biological. Not a poison they can treat. It's an energy scar. A wound on your aura." The silence in the room was heavy, thick with unspoken fear and the consequences of his actions. Ash swung his legs over the side of the bed, the movement sending another jolt of cold pain through his arm. He ignored it. "The forest?" "It's recovering," Serena said, a small, sad smile finally touching her lips as she turned to face him. "The Zygarde core is safe. Bonnie's squishy has been happy for the first time in weeks. You did it, Ash. You saved it." The victory felt hollow. "And Thorne?" The smile vanished. Serena picked up a tablet from the bedside table and handed it to him. "He's winning," she said simply. The screen was filled with news reports. The headline from the Lumiose Press screamed, "King in Crisis. Unstable power wreaks havoc in Pokémon Sanctuary." Below it was an artfully edited video. It showed Ash, his face contorted in a mask of rage and pain, kneeling in the center of the blighted forest. Waves of purple, toxic-looking energy pulsed outwards from his body, timed perfectly with shots of trees withering and the ground cracking. Then, it showed him collapsing, the land around him stabilizing as if his rampage had finally exhausted itself. The Ethereum harmonizers were portrayed as heroic interventions, activating to contain the destructive surge and restore balance. The narrative was devastatingly effective. Alistair Thorne, in a somber press conference, spoke of his deep concern for the troubled young man. He called Ash a victim of a power too great for any human to bear, a force of nature that needed to be managed for his own safety and the safety of Kalos. He was no longer the hero of the monorail, he was a ticking time bomb. "He used my sacrifice against me," Ash murmured, his fingers tightening on the edge of the tablet. The cold fury that filled him was a stark contrast to the burning agony of the forest. He twisted it. "He's a master of it," Serena said, her voice laced with bitter admiration. "He creates a problem, pushes you to solve it in the most dramatic way possible, then frames you as the cause. Public opinion is divided. The people in the rural areas, the ones closer to nature, they're skeptical. They see him as an outsider. But here in the city, people are scared. Thorne is offering them safety, control. You're offering them chaos and a king who passes out after every miracle." Ash let the tablet fall to the bed. The exhaustion he felt was more than just physical. It was a weariness of the soul. He had fought with all his heart, bled for this land, and his reward was to be painted as a monster. The old Ash would have raged, would have stormed out and demanded a battle to prove his worth. But the icy ache in his arm was a constant reminder that this was a different kind of fight. Brute force wouldn't win this. "So what do we do?" he asked, looking to Serena. The question was an admission, a quiet surrender. He was the power. She was the plan. Serena stood up and walked to a large map of Kalos pinned to the wall, a new addition to Clement's command center. It was covered in notes and markers. "We stopped playing his game," she said, her voice regaining a spark of its usual fire. "He controls the media. He controls the cities. We can't beat him there. So we go where he has no power." She tapped a remote, mountainous region in the northern part of Kalos. "Here." Clement, entering from the next room with a tray of food, picked up the thread. "A sudden cold snap, completely unseasonal, has caused a series of rockslides and avalanches in the Grand Teton mountain range. The main road to the village of Argenta is completely blocked. They're isolated." "Let me guess," Ash said, a grim certainty dawning on him. "Thorne's geological surveys have been very active in that area." "His drills have been running stability tests for a month," Clement confirmed. "He caused the landslide, Ash. I'm sure of it. And now he'll be preparing his grand rescue. Flying in with a fleet of Ethereum airships, clearing the roads with his advanced tech, delivering supplies. He'll be their savior. Unless we get there first," Serena finished, her eyes locking on Ash. "But not his way. Not with a show of force. We don't fly in like gods. We walk in like neighbors." The plan was simple, radical, and risky. It required them to trust in the one thing Thorne couldn't manufacture, heart. Getting to the isolated village of Argenta was an ordeal. The main roads were impassable, so they took old, forgotten trails through the rugged foothills. They traveled light, Ash, Serena, Clement, Bonnie, and a handful of their most versatile Pokémon. There were no grand pronouncements, no press releases. They simply went. The work was backbreaking. The air was thin and cold. They spent the first 2 days helping the local rescue teams, not as a king and his entourage, but as simple volunteers. Ash, ignoring the throbbing protest of his scarred arm, used his raw physical strength, honed by years of adventure, to haul away fallen rocks that machines couldn't reach. Pikachu and Clement's Luxray used their electricity to power emergency communication equipment and lights. Gudra's gentle nature was perfect for coaxing terrified, trapped Pokémon out of the rubble, while Serena, ever calm and resourceful, moved through the makeshift shelters that had been set up at the base of the slide. She was a whirlwind of quiet competence. She didn't command, she organized. She found blankets for the cold, used her own medical supplies to tend to minor injuries on people and Pokémon alike, and sat with crying children, calming them with stories and a warm smile. She used Fennekin to light campfires and Pancham to entertain the restless kids with its playful antics. She wasn't a performer seeking an audience, she was a beacon of warmth in a cold, frightening situation. Ash watched her, a feeling of profound awe settling over him. He saw her talking to an old woman, her face etched with worry, whose milk tank was trapped in a collapsed barn. Serena didn't make grand promises. She just listened, her expression one of deep, genuine empathy. Then she came to Ash. "The main support beam has collapsed," she told him quietly. "If we can just lift it a few inches, the mill tank can get out." They worked together. Ash positioned himself, gritting his teeth as he prepared to lift. He felt the familiar urge to tap into the sigil's power, to shift the earth and solve the problem in an instant. But he stopped himself. That was Thorne's way, overwhelming force. This had to be different. This had to be human. He took the strain, his muscles screaming in protest. Alan, who had joined them, added his strength. But it wasn't enough. The beam was too heavy. "Wait," Serena said. She brought over a group of local trainers with their Mak-Hoke and Hariyama. Together. Following her direction, people and Pokemon pushed and heaved as one. The great beam groaned, lifted, and the frightened mill tank scrambled out to safety, nuzzling its grateful owner. The cheer that went up from the small crowd wasn't the roar of a stadium. It was the quiet, heartfelt cheer of a community helping itself. And at the center of it, directing the effort, was Serena. They worked for 3 days. They ate cold rations, slept in tents beside the villagers, and covered themselves in the same dirt and grime. They didn't talk about kings or crowns or gods. They talked about the weather, about sick Pokemon, about how to fix a broken generator. They were just people, helping people. The villagers, initially wary of the famous Boy King from the news, began to see something different. They saw a young man who worked until he was ready to drop and a young woman whose compassion was a force of nature in its own right. On the third night, the main road was finally cleared enough for Thorne's convoy to arrive. A fleet of pristine white Ethereum trucks rolled in, bathing the valley in sterile floodlights. Thorne himself stepped out of a luxury vehicle, dressed in an immaculate Arctic parka, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like a model for a magazine ad, completely out of place amidst the mud and debris. He began directing his teams, handing out high-tech thermal blankets and pre-packaged meals, a camera crew capturing his every benevolent gesture. But the atmosphere was not what he expected. The villagers accepted his aid politely, but there was a distance, a coolness. Their saviors had already arrived, and they hadn't come with cameras. Later that night, the work finally done, Ash and Serena found a quiet spot on a ridge overlooking the valley. The Ethereum camp was a blaze of artificial light below, while the village itself was a collection of warm, flickering campfires. A gentle snow had begun to fall, muffling the world in a blanket of white. Pikachu was asleep in Ash's lap, exhausted. Serena sat beside him, wrapped in a thick blanket, leaning her head against his shoulder. The shared warmth was a small comfort against the biting cold. "He'll spin this, you know," Ash said quietly, watching the sterile lights of Thorne's camp. "He'll say he did all the real work. That we were just a publicity stunt." "Let him," Serena replied, her voice soft. "He can't fake what happened here. The feeling. You can't broadcast that on the news." She looked at the village, at the fires where families and Pokemon were huddled together, safe. "This is how we win. Not by being stronger, but by being better. By reminding people what real connection looks like." Ash looked at her, her face illuminated by the distant fires, snowflakes melting in her hair. He saw the strength that had held him together for the past weeks, the fierce intelligence that saw a path when he only saw a wall, the bottomless well of compassion that had just warmed an entire village. He saw the girl who had followed him across Kalos, who had found her own dream, and who had then, without hesitation, put it on hold to help him carry the impossible weight of his. The throbbing in his arms seemed to fade. The chill of the mountain night receded. All that was left was a profound warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. He reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around a small, smooth piece of wood. He'd been carving it in the quiet moments of the past few days, with a simple pocket knife. It wasn't much, just a piece of fallen birch from the recovering forest, whittled into the shape of a simple, unadorned ring. "Serena," he said, his voice suddenly thick. She lifted her head from his shoulder, looking at him with a questioning gaze. He took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs. This wasn't a concession. It wasn't him giving in to her ultimatum. This was a realization. A declaration. When you said, what you said, back in the hotel. I thought you were trying to trap me, he began, his voice low and earnest. I thought you were trying to stop me from being me. But I was wrong. He looked from the ring in his hand to her wide, shining eyes. This whole time, you haven't been trying to change me. You've been trying to make sure I don't lose myself. You see the board. You see the threats. But you also see me. The real me. He held out the small, wooden ring in his open palm. It was crude, imperfect, but it was real. It was honest. It was made of the very land he was sworn to protect. I can't do this alone. I don't want to do this alone. The Guardian King of Kalos, it's not just a title for me. It can't be. It has to be for us. He looked her directly in the eye, his heart pounding in his chest, a feeling more terrifying and exhilarating than any Pokemon battle. Serena. Will you marry me? Not because you have to, or because I'm a king. But because I need you. Anne. I love you. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering in the firelight. They streamed down her cold cheeks, but she was smiling, a radiant, beautiful smile that lit up the night. She didn't say yes right away. She simply launched herself at him, her arms wrapping around his neck, holding him so tightly it was hard to breathe. She finally pulled back, her hands framing his face. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Of course, yes. He slipped the simple wooden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It wasn't a diamond. It wasn't a crown. It was a vow, made in the ashes of a disaster, a promise to face the coming storm together. Bonnie, who had been watching from a distance with Clement, her presence hidden by the falling snow, saw Squishy, the Zygarde cell she kept safe in her bag, begin to pulse with a warm, steady, approving green light. The land itself was bearing witness. Their marriage was no longer an ultimatum. It was a pact. A partnership. A kingdom of two, born not of power or politics, but of a quiet vow made on a cold mountain night. Chapter 6, The God-Slayer's Lair. The victory on the mountain was a quiet one, a battle won in hearts and minds, not on television screens. But it was a victory nonetheless. Thorne's narrative had been dented. Whispers began to spread through the rural communities, stories of the boy king who worked with his hands and the compassionate girl who was always by his side. It wasn't enough to turn the tide of public opinion, but it was a start. It was a seed of doubt planted in the sterile soil of Thorne's propaganda. They returned to Lumios not as conquering heroes, but as a solidified unit, their purpose sharpened, their bond forged into something unbreakable. The wooden ring on Serena's finger was a constant, tangible reminder of their vow. It was a quiet rebellion against the crowns and titles the world wanted to force upon them. Their return, however, was met with grim news. Clement, his face pale and his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights, pointed to a new set of data on his main screen. He's accelerating the project, he said, his voice tight with urgency. The siphoning I detected before. It was just testing. Now, it's systematic. The energy dips are becoming more frequent, more powerful. He's not just mapping the grid anymore. He's drawing on it. And it's all being funneled to a single, undisclosed location. He knows we're a threat now, Alan surmised, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. The mountain cost him popular support in the regions. He's abandoning the Hearts and Minds campaign for a direct move on his endgame. Can you find the location? Ash asked, his hand instinctively going to his scarred arm. The cold ache was a permanent part of him now, a barometer for Thorne's machinations. It was flaring with a low, persistent throb. I've been trying, Clement replied, typing furiously. The energy is being routed through a series of shielded conduits and dummy corporations. It's the most sophisticated digital shell game I've ever seen. But I found a flaw. He brought up a piece of code, a complex algorithm that glowed on the screen. When they installed the harmonizer near the forest, their technicians had to interface with the central network. They left a digital breadcrumb. A single, encrypted data packet. I've been working on it ever since we got back. For 2 days, Clement worked without rest, fueled by coffee and a burning need for answers. Ash, Serena, and Elan took turns watching over him, running interference with League officials, and training their Pokémon for the inevitable confrontation. The suite had become a war room, the air thick with tension and the smell of ozone from Clement's overworked servers. Finally, late on the second night, a triumphant cry broke the silence. "I'm in." They rushed to his side. On the screen, the complex code dissolved, replaced by a blueprint. A detailed schematic of a massive, subterranean facility. It's hidden deep inside the winding woods, disguised as a meteorological research station, Clement explained, his voice buzzing with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He built it right on top of a major convergence of Kalos's ley lines. It's the heart of his network. Ash, whatever he's planning, it's happening there. There was no debate. There was no need for a vote. They were a team, a single cohesive unit moving with a shared purpose. Ash, Serena, Clement, Bonnie, and Elan. The king, the queen, the scientist, the heart, and the knight. The mission was set for the following night, under the cover of a new moon. The winding woods lived up to their name, a labyrinth of ancient, gnarled trees that seemed to actively try to mislead travelers. But Ash didn't need a map. He could feel the facility, a discordant, cancerous note in the deep, harmonious song of the forest. It was a place of wrongness, a dead spot in the world's life force that pulsed with a stolen, artificial power. His scar ached with a cold, rhythmic intensity, a beacon guiding them to their target. The meteorological station was a simple, unassuming concrete bunker set in a small clearing. It looked abandoned. But Clement's sensors told a different story. "It's just the tip of the iceberg," he whispered, his tablet showing a massive structure extending hundreds of meters into the earth below. "The place is powered up and crawling with security. Stealth is the priority," Elan stated, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "We get in, Clement finds out what Thorne's endgame is, and we get out. We strike when we know what we're striking at." Serena nodded in agreement. "No big displays of power, Ash. Not until we have to." Ash met her gaze, a silent promise passing between them. He would be the scalpel, not the sledgehammer. Clement's palm arm deactivated the perimeter sensors with a series of precise snips and electronic pulses. They moved like ghosts through the woods, with Greninja and Elan's Charizard taking out the silent drone patrols with swift, targeted attacks before they could raise an alarm. They reached the bunker's main entrance, a heavy-duty steel blast door. "No way to hack this without tripping every alarm in the facility," Clement murmured. Ash stepped forward. He placed his good hand on the cold steel. He didn't push. He didn't channel his power. He simply listened. He felt the intricate locking mechanisms inside, the tumblers, the magnetic seals. He relayed the information to Clement in a low whisper. "For magnetic locks, top and bottom. A central cog system, it's powered by a separate generator." With Ash's sensory input and Clement's technical genius, they bypassed the door in under 5 minutes. It slid open with a barely audible hiss into a corridor of sterile white walls and cold, fluorescent light. The air was frigid, smelling of sterilized metal and charged ions. It was a place utterly devoid of life. The facility was a maze. They moved through the silent corridors, a tight-knit combat unit. Greninja moved ahead, a shadow scouting the path, while Clement guided them with the stolen blueprints on his tablet. The security they encountered was unlike anything they'd faced before. Elite Ethereum guards in full body armor, armed with rifles that fired concussive energy blasts. Automated turrets that dropped from the ceiling, spitting a hail of plasma fire. The fighting was close quarters, brutal, and silent. There were no grand, flashy moves. It was Alan's Charizard using its claws and tail in the cramped corridors, a ballet of controlled destruction. It was Ash's Pikachu disabling turrets with precise jolts of electricity aimed at their power couplings. It was Serena's Delphox, using mystical fire not as a massive blast, but as a targeted flare to blind guards and melt weapon systems, her commands delivered in sharp, efficient whispers. "Clement, how much further?" Ash grunted, ducking behind a bulkhead as plasma fire stitched a pattern across the wall where his head had been. "The central control room is just ahead," Clement replied, his own chase pin laying down a covering fire of pin missiles. "But the server hub that controls the entire network is in a separate chamber below it. That's our primary target." They fought their way to a large, circular chamber. The door slid open to reveal the nerve center of the operation. Technicians in white lab coats worked at consoles, their faces illuminated by the glow of data streams. But they weren't the focus. In the center of the room, suspended in a crackling energy field, was the prize Thorne's network had been built to contain. It was a Zygarde core. Not sleeping, not dormant, but writhing in agony. It pulsed with a sick, purple light, identical to the poison Ash had absorbed in the forest. Conduits, thick as a man's arm, snaked from the containment field to a massive, dark shape looming in an alcove at the far end of the room. The shape was a machine. A colossal, humanoid mech, easily 50 feet tall, its armor a sleek, sinister blend of black and silver. It was unpowered, dormant, but its presence was overwhelmingly menacing. A name was stenciled on its chest in stark, white letters, Praetor. "My God," Clement breathed, his face ashen. "It's a weapon. He's not just stealing the energy. He's trying to power that." Bonnie, who had been quiet the entire time, let out a small, horrified gasp. It's in so much pain," she whispered, her connection to Zygarde making her an unwilling witness to the core's torture. Squishy trembled in her bag. They had seen enough. This was the endgame. "Get me to the server hub," Clement said, his voice hard as steel. "I can shut this down. Maybe even wipe his entire project." Alan nodded. "Ash, Serena, you're with me. We create a diversion here. Buy him time." Ash met Serena's eyes. This was it. The plan had changed. Stealth was over. "Let's get loud," Ash said, a cold smile touching his lips. The battle for the control room was an explosion of pent-up power. Ash, no longer holding back, fought with a savage, synchronized grace. Ash Greninja moved like a phantom, the giant water shuriken on its back glowing with a fierce blue light, disabling consoles and driving back guards. Alan's Mega Charizard X unleashed a torrent of blue flame that sent technicians scattering for cover. Serena's Delphox stood like a sorceress, her branch held aloft, creating walls of fire to funnel the enemy and protect Clement and Bonnie as they slipped towards a maintenance hatch in the floor. As Clement disappeared into the level below, the main view screen in the control room flickered to life. Alistair Thorne's face appeared, life-sized and unnervingly calm. He wasn't in the facility. He was somewhere else, watching them on a monitor, a faint, amused smile on his lips. "Well, well," Thorne's smooth voice echoed through the chamber, "the Guardian King and his royal court. I must confess, I'm impressed. You made it further than my simulations predicted." "It's over, Thorne," Ash yelled, standing amidst the wreckage. "We know what you're doing." "Do you?" Thorne chuckled, a sound devoid of all humor. "You see a weapon. I see the future. Zygarde is a chaotic, unpredictable deity. Its power, the life force of Kalos, is an untapped natural resource of unimaginable potential. You, Ash, can borrow it. You can plead with it. I intend to command it. To master it. the Praetor isn't just a machine. It is a new god. A god of order, of progress, of human ingenuity. A god that will not be swayed by sentiment or prayer. He gestured dismissively. This facility. This core. This is merely a prototype. A proof of concept. The true, deicide project is far grander. My network of harmonizers is not just for siphoning. It's for broadcasting. Once I have perfected the process of breaking Zygarde's will, I will use its own network to issue a single command to every cell on this planet: submit. The sheer, megalomaniacal arrogance of his plan was breathtaking. He wasn't just trying to capture a legendary. He was trying to lobotomize a god and hijack its body. "You're insane," Alan growled. "Am I?" Thorne's smile widened. "Or am I simply the only one with the vision to see what must be done? But I'm afraid your little expedition ends here. I can't have you interrupting the final calibration." He glanced at something off-screen. "Ah, and it seems your little hacker is about to trip my final firewall. A pity." A klaxon began to blare, bathing the room in flashing red light. A synthesized voice echoed from the walls: "System-wide data purge initiated. Facility self-destruct sequence activated. Detonation in 5 minutes." Thorne's face on the screen was replaced by a countdown timer. "It was a trap," Serena said, her eyes wide. "He knew we were coming. He wanted us here. He's going to bury us with his research," Ash realized. The floor shuddered as the first of the demolition charges went off in the lower levels. Clement's voice crackled over their communicators. "Ash. I'm trapped. The firewalls are rerouting the self-destruct to this level. He's trying to wipe the servers and us with them." There was no time. The exits were sealed. The ceiling began to groan and buckle. "Alan, Serena, get Bonnie and Clement," Ash commanded, his voice ringing with an absolute authority that cut through the panic. "Get to the main shaft. I'll buy you time." "What are you going to do?" Serena cried, her hand reaching for him. He looked at the Praetor mech, at the conduits feeding the tortured Zygarde core. A desperate, insane plan formed in his mind. He was connected to Zygarde. That connection was a two-way street. "Something stupid," he said with a grim smile. He pressed a quick, hard kiss to her lips. "Now go." As they scrambled back towards the hatch, Ash turned to face the containment field. He placed both hands on the humming console, the sigil on his right hand and his unmarred left. He closed his eyes and reached out, not with his body, but with his aura, his very soul. He plunged his consciousness into the screaming chaos of the Zygarde network. He didn't try to soothe the captured core. He didn't try to heal it. He screamed with it. He joined its pain, its rage, its desperate desire to be free. He opened himself completely, becoming a bridge, a conduit between the imprisoned core and the vast, planetary consciousness of Zygarde Prime. "Wake up!" He screamed into the network. "They are killing us. Fight!" The response was cataclysmic. The entire facility buckled as, all across Kalos, the earth itself seemed to roar in fury. The green ley lines, the rivers of life force that Thorne had so carefully mapped, erupted with uncontrollable power. The energy didn't flow into Thorne's network, it surged against it, a tidal wave crashing against a dam. The conduits connected to the Praetor overloaded and exploded in a shower of sparks. The containment field around the Zygarde core shattered. Freed, the core shot out of the chamber like a green bullet, phasing through the wall and vanishing into the earth. But the backlash of channeling that much raw, untamed power was immense. The facility was tearing itself apart around Ash. He felt a colossal weight press down on him as the ceiling gave way. He threw his arms up, the sigil on his hand flaring with a brilliant green light. A dome of pure energy, a shield of raw life force, erupted around him, holding back tons of collapsing rock and twisted metal for one precious second. Through a gap in the debris, he saw them, Serena, Alan, and the others, escaping up the main elevator shaft just as the mountain imploded. Then the world became only pressure, darkness, and a deafening roar. But the damage was done. The trap had been sprung. As his friends escaped, they looked back to see not just the mountain collapsing, but something far more terrifying. All across the horizon, from every point where they knew a harmonizer tower stood, brilliant green beams of light shot into the sky. The planetary immune response Ash had triggered was being captured by Thorne's network. The final siphoning had begun. The lights converged on a single point in the distance, a point they all recognized with a sickening dread. The glittering spire in the heart of Lumio City. The final battle wasn't here in the rubble. It was just beginning. Chapter 7, The King and the Praetor. The escape from the imploding mountain was a chaotic, desperate flight. Alan's Charizard, powerful wings beating against the concussive force of the explosion, carried them clear of the collapsing rock and raining debris. Serena clung to Alan, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the billowing cloud of dust where Ash had been. He had promised to buy them time. He hadn't promised to survive. The raw, visceral terror of that thought was a physical weight in her chest, so heavy it was hard to breathe. Clement, his face grim, held a terrified Bonnie close, shielding her from the horrifying sight of the mountain devouring itself. His mind, usually a whirlwind of calculations and schematics, was numb. He had the data, he'd managed a full system download in the final seconds before the purge, a treasure trove of information about the Deicide project, but the price had been Ash. As they cleared the dust cloud, the true horror of the situation revealed itself. The sky, from horizon to horizon, was scarred with pillars of emerald light. Every harmonizer tower, every node in Thorne's parasitic network, was now acting as a colossal siphon, drawing the raw, untamed life force that Ash had unleashed and funneling it towards Lumio City. The very air grew thin and cold, as if the world itself was gasping for breath. The vibrant greens of the landscape below seemed to dim, the leaves on the trees curling and paling. A palpable wave of dread, a psychic chill, washed over the region, a feeling of life being drawn away at its source. And then the ground began to shake. It was not the localized tremor of an earthquake, but a deep, resonant shudder, the entire tectonic plate groaning in agony. Far to the south, near Anistar City, a colossal shape erupted from the earth. Zygarde. But not the controlled, majestic being from the stadium. This was a creature of pure, mindless instinct. Its 50% for me thrashed wildly, its serpentine body leveling entire swathes of forest, its movements erratic and violent. It was a wounded animal, lashing out in pain and confusion as its very essence was being drained away. It no longer recognized friend from foe, balance from chaos. It was simply trying to break free from the invisible leeches that were bleeding it dry. "He's killing it," Bonnie whispered, tears streaming down her face. She could feel its agony, a symphony of pain that made Ash's psychic scream in the forest seem like a single, quiet note. "No," Alan said, his voice a low, dangerous growl as he stared at the converging beams of light. "He's capturing it. He's driving it mad, weakening it, so he can move in and claim the prize." As if on cue, a shadow fell over Lumio City. From the apex of Prism Tower, where the beams of green energy converged, something detached itself. It descended with a terrifying, silent grace, a monument of silver and black metal. The Praetor. It was no longer the dormant machine from the hidden lair. It was alive. The siphoned life force of Kalos pulsed in glowing green circuits that traced its powerful limbs. It was a profane fusion of technology and nature, a metal shell filled with a stolen soul. It landed in the Grand Plaza at the base of the tower with an earth-shattering impact that cracked the marble, its massive form dwarfing the surrounding buildings. Its head, a featureless black visor, turned, surveying the city it was about to claim. Alistair Thorne's voice, amplified to a godlike volume, boomed from speakers embedded in the mech's chest. "People of Kalos. Witness your salvation. The age of chaotic, unpredictable nature is over. The age of fear is over. Today, a new order begins. An order forged by human hands. An order you can rely on. The praetor raised one massive arm and pointed towards the south, where the rampaging Sigurd was causing untold destruction. Your god has failed you. It has become a mindless beast. I will now do what must be done. I will subdue it, contain it, and usher in an era of absolute peace and stability under my protection. The strategy was diabolical. He had turned Sigurd into a monster, and now he was positioning himself as the only one who could stop it. Serena's heart, already fractured with worry, shattered completely. It was over. Ash was gone, and Thorne, in his man-made god, was about to claim the world. But then, a flicker of movement in the rubble of the collapsed mountain caught her eye. A single point of brilliant blue light. It grew, intensified, and then erupted outwards, blasting tons of rock away as if they were pebbles. From the heart of the mountain, he rose. Ash. He was floating, his body wreathed in a swirling vortex of blue and green energy. His eyes were closed, and the sigil on his hand blazed with the light of a supernova. The scar on his arm was no longer a dark web of poison, but a conduit, glowing with the same emerald light as the ley lines themselves. He hadn't just survived the collapse, he had absorbed it. He had become one with the raw, chaotic power he had unleashed. He landed softly on the ground before them, the energy receding into his body. He looked different. Older. The boyish energy was gone, replaced by an ancient, weary stillness. He was exhausted, but he was whole. And he was furious. Ash. Serena cried, launching herself from Charizard's back before it had even fully landed. She slammed into him, her arms wrapping around him, burying her face in his chest, her relief so profound it came out as a ragged sob. I thought you were. He held her tight, his hand stroking her hair. I told you I'd buy you time, he whispered, his voice rough. He looked over her shoulder at the distant city, at the towering form of the praetor, at the green beams tearing the life from his world. And now I'm going to finish this. He met Alan's eyes. Get everyone to the city. Protect the people. Get them clear of the fighting. This is between me and him. Alan nodded, his expression grim with respect. What are you going to do? Ash looked at his hands, at the power crackling just beneath his skin. I've been trying to control it. To contain it, he said softly. But Thorne, Sigurd, Kalos, they're all in pain. You can't heal a wound that deep with a scalpel. You have to burn out the infection. He kissed Serena one last time, a kiss filled with the fire of his resolve and the depth of his love. I love you, he said. No matter what happens. He then gently pushed her back towards Alan. Keep her safe. He left his other Pokémon with them, except for one. Pikachu leaped from Serena's shoulder back to his rightful place. You and me, buddy, Ash said, scratching the little mouse behind the ears. One last time. Pika Pi. Pikachu replied, its cheeks sparking with defiant energy. Ash closed his eyes. He didn't need to fly. He reached out, not to the earth, but to the network, the song of the world. He found a current, a river of life force that flowed towards Lumios, and he simply stepped into it. He vanished from the mountainside in a flash of green and blue light. He reappeared in the skies above Lumio City an instant later, a meteor of pure energy streaking towards the heart of the chaos. Down below, the praetor was on the move. It marched through the city, its massive feet crushing cars and cracking streets, heading towards the rampaging Sigurd. It was a battle of titans waiting to happen, with a million innocent lives caught in the middle. Ash didn't go for the praetor. He went for Sigurd. He landed directly in the path of the maddened legendary. The great beast, its eyes glowing with a mindless red rage, roared and fired a dragon pulse, a beam of pure destructive force that could level a city block. Ash didn't move. He simply held up his hand, the sigil flaring. He didn't block the attack. He met it, absorbed it, the torrent of draconic energy flowing into his body without leaving a single scorch mark. Sigurd faltered, its mindless rage pierced by a flicker of confusion. "I'm not here to fight you," Ash said, his voice calm and clear, echoing not in the air, but directly in Sigurd's fractured consciousness. "I'm here to help. I know you're in pain. I can feel it. But you have to stop. You're hurting the very land you're sworn to protect. Let me help you." He reached out, his aura a soothing balm of blue against the raging fire of Sigurd's pain. He was a beacon of order in its sea of chaos. He was reminding it of its purpose. Of their bond. The red in Sigurd's eyes began to fade, replaced by its natural, intelligent green. It stopped thrashing. It looked at Ash, then at the city it had been about to destroy, a dawning horror in its ancient mind. Thorne, seeing his pawn being pacified, would not stand for it. "Sentimental fool," his voice boomed from the praetor. "If it will not be subdued, it will be annihilated." The praetor's shoulder compartment slid open, revealing a battery of missiles. They launched, streaking towards the now stationary Sigurd. "No!" Ash yelled. He moved, a blur of motion, appearing between Sigurd and the incoming volley. He couldn't absorb this much raw explosive power. He needed more. He needed everything. He turned to Sigurd, his decision made. It was the ultimate gamble. "I can't beat him alone," he projected into the legendary's mind. "And you are too weak. But together, we are the Guardian King. We are the heart of Kalos. Trust me. Lend me your power. Lend me your form." Sigurd looked at the boy before it, this strange, ephemeral creature of flesh and bone who held the song of the world in his soul. It saw his resolve, his sacrifice, his absolute lack of self-interest. It had made him a king. Now, he was asking to be its heart. It lowered its great head in a gesture of assent. Ash placed his hand on Sigurd's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. He then fully, completely, and irrevocably opened himself up. He let the dam of his own consciousness break, allowing the entirety of Sigurd's being, its power, its pain, its ancient wisdom, to flood into him. The transformation was not like the bond with Greninja. This was not synchronization. This was fusion. This was ascension. Ash's body dissolved into a torrent of blue aura. Sigurd's form dissolved into a swirling mass of 1,000,000 green cells. The two energies, blue and green, order and life, intertwined, braided together, and then erupted into a pillar of light that pierced the heavens. When the light faded, a new being stood where they had been. It was Sigurd's perfect for me, a colossal, winged, humanoid titan with the power to shatter mountains. But it was different. Its chest plate, usually a spectrum of colors, was a solid, blazing cobalt blue. Its eyes glowed with the same blue, the color of Ash's aura. And at its core, visible through the swirling energy, was a human consciousness, a human heart, guiding the divine machine. Ash Ketchum was the pilot of a god. The new form raised a hand, and a wall of shimmering green energy appeared, effortlessly stopping Thorne's missile barrage. The explosions were nothing, harmless fireworks against a mountain. Inside the praetor, Alistair Thorne stared at his view screen in disbelief. His simulations had not predicted this. This was not in any of his models. This was impossible. What are you?" he stammered, his confident facade finally cracking. A voice, layered and ancient, but with the unmistakable undertone of a boy from Pallet Town, echoed in his cockpit and across the entire city. "I am this world's anger," it boomed. "And I am its hope. I am its guardian. And you are a trespasser." The battle of gods began. The praetor, a marvel of human engineering, was fast and powerful. It lunged forward, its fist encased in a field of siphoned energy, a blow that could pulverize a skyscraper. Ash Sigurd met the blow with its own, and the resulting shockwave shattered every window for a mile in every direction. The fight was a cataclysm. They tore through Lumio City, a hurricane of steel and divine light. But there was a difference. The Praetor's movements were brutal, efficient, uncaring of the destruction it caused. Ashsigard's were controlled, precise. Every blow was calculated. Every movement was designed to shield the innocent. When the Praetor threw a bus, Ashsigard would catch it and set it down gently before retaliating. When Thorne fired a devastating chest beam, Ashsigard would take the hit, its body regenerating instantly, to prevent the beam from hitting a hospital behind it. He was fighting not just to win, but to protect. Down below, Serena, Alan, and the others worked frantically, their Pokémon herding terrified citizens into the relative safety of the subway system. Serena watched the sky, her heart in her throat with every earth-shaking blow. She could see him, a tiny flicker of blue in the heart of the green giant, and she poured all of her hope, all of her love, into that single point of light. The Praetor was powerful, but it was running on a finite, stolen battery. Ashsigard was powered by the planet itself. The tide began to turn. Ashsigard, faster, stronger, more versatile, began to systematically dismantle the Praetor. It tore off an arm with a blast of dragon pulse. It shattered the leg joints with a targeted Land's Wrath that erupted from the street itself. Thorne, in his crippled machine, grew desperate. He redirected all remaining power to his main cannon. "If I cannot have this world," he screamed, his voice raw with fury, "then I will scar it forever." A beam of pure, concentrated, stolen life force, a hideous purple-green in color, erupted from the Praetor's chest, aimed not at Ashsigard, but at the Prism Tower, the heart of the city and the epicenter of his own broken network. Ashsigard moved to intercept it, but it knew it couldn't fully block a blast that powerful without devastating the city block behind it. It needed more. It needed a final, overwhelming push. And in that moment, a flash of yellow zipped up the side of a building. Pikachu, having been carried along with the evacuation, saw his partner, his friend, in his moment of need. He leaped from the top of the skyscraper, a tiny ball of yellow fur against a canvas of gods and monsters. Ashsigard saw him. Their bond, the first and most powerful of all, flared to life across the impossible distance. "Pikachu. Now." Ash's voice boomed. Pikachu's body erupted with lightning, but this was no ordinary thunderbolt. Infused with the ambient divine energy of the battle, amplified by the unbreakable bond with a boy who was now a god, it was a torrent of absolute, world-breaking power. The Z-move of a lifetime. A 10 million volt thunderbolt, magnified 1,000-fold. The bolt of lightning didn't strike the Praetor. It struck Ashsigard. The divine form became a conduit, absorbing the entirety of Pikachu's attack. The blue in its chest flared, becoming a blinding white. It met Thorne's beam with its own, a colossal blast of blue, green, and gold, a fusion of aura, nature, and lightning. The beam, dubbed Core Enforcer, tore through Thorne's desperate attack, engulfed the Praetor, and slammed it back against the Prism Tower. There was no grand explosion. Just a surge of purifying light. The stolen energy in the Praetor was neutralized, released. The advanced metal of its armor crumbled, not into fire and shrapnel, but into dust. The entire network of harmonizer towers across Kalos overloaded and went dark in the same instant. When the light faded, the Praetor was gone. Only a fraction of its cockpit, fused to the base of the Prism Tower, remained. The battle was over. Chapter 8, A Kingdom of Two. The silence that fell over Lumio City was more profound than the cataclysmic noise that had preceded it. It was the sound of a world holding its breath. The sky, moments before a canvas of warring gods, was now a calm, clear blue. The sinister green pillars of light were gone. The oppressive, life-draining chill had lifted, replaced by the cool, clean air of a new morning. In the center of the ruined plaza, the colossal form of Zygarde's Perfect for Me stood motionless, a silent, victorious monument. Then, with a soft, ethereal shimmer, the fusion broke. The divine form dissolved into its constituent parts, a swirling cloud of 1,000,000 green cells that flowed like a river back into the earth, replenishing the scarred land, and a single figure, wreathed in a fading blue aura, who crumpled to the ground. Ash. Serena was already running, her legs pumping, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She vaulted over chunks of broken pavement and twisted metal, her eyes locked on his fallen form. She reached him just as Alan and the others caught up, their faces a mixture of awe and deep concern. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands hovering, afraid to touch him. He was lying on his side, his breathing shallow, his face pale and etched with an exhaustion so profound it seemed to sink into his very bones. His eyes were closed. "Ash," she whispered, her voice trembling. He stirred, a low groan escaping his lips. He rolled onto his back, his eyes fluttering open. They were his own again, the familiar, warm brown, but they held a new depth, the weary weight of ancient knowledge and immense sacrifice. He tried to push himself up, and that's when she saw his arm. The ugly, purplish-black web of Thorne's poison was gone. But in its place, the scar had changed. The Zygarde sigil on the back of his hand was no longer a simple tattoo. It had spread, branching out in intricate, luminous green lines that spiraled up his entire arm, glowing with a soft, steady light, like rivers of life force flowing just beneath his skin. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a part of him, a permanent, living extension of his bond with the world. He looked at his arm, then at her worried face, and managed a weak, tired smile. "Did we win?" Tears of relief streamed down Serena's face as she let out a choked laugh. She threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "Yeah, Ash," she whispered into his shoulder. "We won." The aftermath was a blur of activity. The Ethereum Corporation, its charismatic leader captured and its god machine destroyed, crumbled overnight. Alistair Thorne was extracted from the wreckage of the Praetor's cockpit, alive but broken, his ambition shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, his eyes vacant. Stripped of his technology and his influence, he was just a man, and he was promptly taken into custody by Kalos League officials. The rebuilding of Lumio City began almost immediately, a testament to the resilience of its people. But the true healing was happening on a deeper level. With Thorne's network gone, the life force of Kalos surged back into the land. Wilting crops perked up, weakened Pokémon regained their strength, and a sense of vitality returned to the region. The world felt brighter, more vibrant. Ash's recovery was slow. The fusion with Zygarde had taken a heavy toll. The permanent connection to Kalos's life force, now flowing through the intricate patterns on his arm, was a constant, exhausting sensory input. He couldn't turn it off. He could feel the sap rising in the trees a mile away, the hatching of a fledgling egg in a distant nest, the slow, grinding movement of tectonic plates deep beneath his feet. It was no longer a painful scream, but a constant, overwhelming symphony. He spent most of his days in quiet seclusion, learning to filter the noise, to find the melody in the cacophony. Serena never left his side, her quiet, calming presence a human anchor in his ocean of planetary senses. Weeks later, a delegation arrived at their hotel. It was Champion Diantha, the 4 regional governors, and Drasna of the Elite Four. They no longer looked at him with suspicion or fear. Their expressions were ones of profound, humbled respect. "The people of Kalos owe you a debt that can never be repaid," Diantha said, her voice filled with a sincerity that stripped away her usual celebrity veneer. "You saved us all. From Thorne, and from ourselves." She placed a formal document on the table. "The Kalos government officially recognizes your status. Not as a monarch in the traditional sense, we remain a republic, but as what Zygarde named you. The Guardian. Your queen," she added, with a nod of respect to Serena, "will be granted full autonomy, diplomatic immunity, and a permanent seat on the Kalos Regional Council. Your voice will be heard in all matters concerning the welfare of the land and its inhabitants." It wasn't a crown or a throne. It was a chair at the table. It was a partnership. It was exactly what they needed. Their wedding was not the grand state affair the government had offered. There were no cameras, no crowds, no political dignitaries. It took place a month later, in the heart of the empty Moline forest, the very one Ash had scarred himself to save. The forest was now a riot of life, more vibrant and lush than it had been in a century. Ancient trees formed a natural cathedral, sunlight filtering through the dense canopy to dapple the mossy ground. The guests were few: Clement, who served as the officiant with a speech that was both scientifically precise and deeply emotional; Bonnie, who was a gleeful flower girl, scattering petals she'd gathered that morning; Alan, who stood as Ash's stoic, proud best man; Ash's mother and Professor Oak, who had flown in from Kanto, their faces beaming with pride, and all of their Pokémon, who formed a joyous, chirping, roaring circle around them. Ash wore a simple dark suit, and Serena wore a beautiful but understated white dress, her hair adorned with a crown of wildflowers. The wooden ring Ash had carved for her on the mountain was still on her finger. As they exchanged their vows, promises not of dominion, but of partnership, protection, and unwavering support, a silent, majestic figure emerged from the trees. Zygarde, in its 50% for me, stood as a silent witness, its ancient eye glowing with a soft, approving light. The land itself was sanctifying their union. When they kissed, it wasn't for a crowd, but for each other. It was the sealing of a pact, the beginning of a new kind of adventure. The final scene of their story was not one of triumph, but of quiet, profound partnership. Months later, Ash and Serena stood on the balcony of their new home, a modest but beautiful house built on a hill overlooking Lumio City, a gift from the people of Kalos. The city glittered below them, fully healed, a testament to their victory. The Prism Tower once again shone as a beacon of hope. Ash, dressed in his familiar jacket, leaned against the railing, his eyes distant. He flinched, a barely perceptible tremor running through him. "There's a tremor," he said, his voice quiet. "A small fault line shifting near Coumarine City. It's unstable. It could trigger a rockslide near the port." The constant connection was still a burden. The weight of his guardianship was ever present. He sighed, a weary sound, and rubbed his temples with his free hand. Serena moved to stand beside him. She didn't offer empty reassurances. She didn't tell him not to worry. She simply took his right hand, the one covered in the luminous, living patterns, and held it in both of hers. Her warmth was a shield against the overwhelming flood of information. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but firm, the voice of a queen. "I'll call the regional office in Coumarine and have them dispatch a geological survey team. Clement can analyze the seismic data and recommend the best place to set up structural supports. We'll handle it." She squeezed his hand. "You don't have to bear it all, Ash." He turned to look at her, the setting sun catching the gold in her honey-blonde hair. He saw not just the girl he loved, but his partner, his equal, his strategist, his anchor. She was the one who made the impossible weight of his crown feel bearable. A genuine, relaxed smile graced his lips, the first one he'd worn in a long time that wasn't tinged with weariness or pain. He leaned his head against hers, their shoulders touching, and looked out at the horizon. The sun was setting on his old life, the endless road, the quest for the next badge. His journey to become a Pokémon master was over. But his greatest adventure, building a kingdom, protecting a world, and sharing a life with his queen, had just begun. Together, they watched the last sliver of sun dip below the skyline, a united front against the endless horizon, a kingdom of two, ready for whatever came next. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.